We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Hey guys! There is the part 2 of What If Naruto Made a Bet of a Lifetime. A childish challenge between teacher and student triggers a chain of events whose outcomes ripple across the ninja world. As the dominoes fall, crashing on the shoulders of the child of prophecy, one question needs to be asked. Will he bear it all, or crumble under the weight of the world? Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 5, Sweet Dreams. Naruto had been running for what seemed like hours on end. The air was thick with mist, making visibility very poor for the genin. He took in a long harsh breath, filling his lungs with the oxygen necessary to continue. His heart was beating furiously, legs felt as if they were made of jelly, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Oddly enough, the blonde had no idea why, or where, he was running. Stopping for a moment to calm down a bit, he leaned against a railing that he had been running alongside. Having been in such a hurry, the blonde hadn't even taken in the surrounding area. Over the railing all that could be seen was water. Well, all that was able to be seen because of the sheer thickness of the fog. Am I on a bridge? He mused, unsure of himself. A deep inhale of air left an almost fishy taste in the back of his throat. Wherever he was, he certainly didn't want to stay there for much longer. Energy now somewhat restored, the blonde took off running, once again in the same direction. There was no logical reason why he was running this way, or at all, for that matter. The last thing he could remember was that he was running, so, he figured, wherever he was going was someplace important. Why was it important, you ask? That was not something the blonde could currently answer. The hope was that the answer would show itself soon. All that kept Naruto going was this strange feeling creeping its way up his body. He didn't like it. Not one bit. There was just this sense of impending doom that he couldn't shake. It sent shivers up his spine. He increased his pace, moving at speeds that would make a jonin proud. Whatever was about to happen, it wasn't good. That he knew. After what seemed like more 10 minutes of running, something could be seen in the distance. Light, he thought to himself, as the fog lit up with a yellow, almost orange, hue. This had to mean that he was close. The answer was just up ahead. The closer he got, the more his heart rate increased. Not from exhaustion this time, but from fear. Fear of what he might see. Fear of the unknown was something that even a seasoned shinobi dreaded. Naruto pushed those feelings down and continued his pace. No turning back now, he thought in an attempt to motivate himself. The end of the fog was in sight. One more step. He broke through the fog and skid to a stop, waiting a few seconds for his eyes to adjust to the now increased visibility. Now focused, his eyes immediately lit up in horror at what he saw. This is Naruto. Jiraiya watched as the boy's eyes snapped open in terror. The blonde's pupils darted rapidly around the room, similar to the way a small animal scans its line of sight trying to locate a concealed predator. Even though the sage wasn't exactly quiet waking his pupil up, this wasn't the reaction he was expecting. Naruto, he said much softer, putting a reassuring hand on his student's shoulder. It's just me, Jiraiya. Are you okay? He asked, shaking him ever so gently in an attempt to help him regain his focus. It seemed to do just that as Naruto, still breathing heavily, shook his head vigorously to regain his senses. Now with focused eyes, the child realized where he was. He was back in the hotel room that he and Jiraiya were staying at. He blinked, now more confused than terrified. Is everything okay, Naruto? Came the concerned voice of his teacher. Why yeah. The blonde said as he rubbed the side of his head with the palm of his hand. I think I was having a bad dream. Voice laced with uncertainty. He glanced over at his alarm clock. 5:30 a.m. Read the evil device. Jiraiya picked up on this. You think? He asked. Naruto yawned as his face scrunched up in deep thought. There were memories floating at the back of his mind. Very recent memories that were just barely out of reach. He tried harder to get a hold of them, but they were just out of his grasp. I don't really remember. He answered after a long pause. Do you remember anything, at all? The sage continued to press, hoping his student would remember anything significant. He thought for a moment. There was something. A detail he deemed so small and insignificant that there was almost no point in even mentioning it. But, considering that was all there was to mention, bringing it up could do no harm either. Water. Was the boy's simple response. Water? The sage asked dumbly. What about water? There was water. Okay. The sage said slowly. Do you remember anything else? Water wasn't exactly something Jiraiya would deem relevant. I don't think so. The blonde was now staring off into space. I just told you that was all I remembered, didn't I? Jiraiya watched his disciple stand up and stretch out his arms. Is there anything you want to talk about? The sage didn't know how to approach this situation. Naruto was clearly a little shaken by whatever it is that he saw in his dream, but he was unable to remember anything about it except for the fact that it had something to do with water. How could he possibly help with that little bit of information? It's at moments like this where it becomes evident to Jiraiya that he is not cut out to be a parent. The only reason he tries at all is that he cares for the little blonde so much. Not that he would tell Naruto any of that. What would Minato do in this situation? He thought to himself desperately. Minato had all the makings of being a great father. The Namikaze was wise beyond his years, very patient with everyone he spoke to, reassuring, and had a kind face that made him easily approachable. Jiraiya wished that he had some of those qualities in order to be the father figure that Naruto needed, but he doubted that that would ever happen. I'm not even sure if there is anything that we can really talk about. The blonde said unsurely. How can you talk about something that you can't really remember? Now Jiraiya was the one deep in thought. How could he help his student cheer up a bit? Because of the blonde's lack of memory, trying to talk about it would do little, to no good. So, what else could bring the genin's spirits up? How about we take your mind off of all of this by finally starting that training I promised you? He asked hopefully. Any negative feelings that Naruto had were immediately being washed away at the prospect of training. In fact, he was practically bouncing up and down from sheer excitement. How could he have forgotten? He beat Jiraiya in a bet, wrote a book, and was finally about to begin his super awesome training. It felt like an impossible dream that has somehow come true. Let's go, pervy sage. The energetic boy sprang to his feet. Before Jiraiya had even realized what was going on, his student was fully dressed in his orange jumpsuit and halfway out the door. Time's a-wasting. Hold it right there, brat. To which the blonde, now sporting a pouty face, stopped in his tracks. Jiraiya shook his head in disbelief. This kid is a roller coaster of emotions, sometimes. I can never say he isn't an easy kid to cheer up, though. Give the brat training or a bowl of ramen and he's the happiest person you'll ever meet. The Jonin smiled lightly. What's the hold-up, pervy sage? His bouncing was now from impatience, not excitement. You said we were gonna train today. We have to pack up all of our stuff. Jiraiya said calmly, hoping his student will mimic his demeanor. We aren't coming back here. Unfortunately for Jiraiya, Naruto could not be calmed so easily. Huh? Why not? There was a tinge of sadness in his voice. The blonde had grown accustomed to the hotel they were staying. It was cozy. Why did they have to leave already? Shut up and listen to me for once in your life. The sooner we get our stuff packed and this place cleaned up, the sooner we can start your training. Got I. Shadow clone jutsu. Poof. Jiraiya's eye twitched in annoyance at being rudely cut off by his student. At least he's listening to me, kind of. The sage, now trying to ignore the blonde, walked to his side of the room and began to pack up his own stuff. Alright, you guys. You heard the man. I want our stuff packed and this room cleaned up by the end of the hour. The blonde's eyes were blazing with passion. There was nothing more he enjoyed doing than training. That's only 15 minutes. One of the doppelgangers huffed in annoyance. Exactly. Which is why you should be moving instead of complaining. The original shot back harshly. The Sannin was watching the whole exchange and could only sigh. No wonder he got punched in the face the other day. He thought to himself dryly. Naruto, one knee bent and the other extended, leaned into a deep stretch. He winced slightly as his hamstring muscles burned lightly in response. Once completed, he sat cross-legged on the ground facing Jiraiya. For the first time in what felt like a long time to the Sannin, his pupil actually looked like he was going to pay attention. This surprised Jiraiya. After everything that transpired today, from his nightmare, to the excitement he showed afterward, the last thing Jiraiya expected from the blonde was calmness. He smiled. A bit of silence every so often was refreshing. It was a rarity nowadays. While Naruto was exuding a level of calmness, inwardly he was conflicted. Yes, he was ecstatic to begin his intense training, but he also could not shake what had happened during the morning. He doesn't have like that dreams often and couldn't remember the last time a nightmare was as intense as that. However, the most infuriating thing of all was that he could barely remember anything from the dream that had left him so rattled. You think something like that would have left a lasting impression on me that'd be hard to forget? He thought, slightly annoyed at his useless brain. As far as he was concerned, his brain had only two jobs. Let him know when he was hungry, so he could eat and remember things. Simple, and yet, it still somehow managed to screw it up. This. Jiraiya's voice pulled the boy from his thoughts. The sage was gesturing to the decent-sized clearing they were standing in the middle of. Is where we will be training for the next month or so. The clearing was about 100 feet in diameter, surrounded on all sides by a dense forest. The ground, which had some grass patches here and there, mostly consisted of a firm, packed-down dirt. Perfect for the boy to train on. They had found this clearing after several hours of traveling. Based on the position of the sun overhead, it was now roughly noon. The blonde cocked his head to the side in apparent confusion. Why are we not staying here for that long? While Naruto didn't like the idea of trading in his comfy hotel bed for the cold ground, having to pack everything up and travel so frequently might be even worse. He just wanted to train. I thought it would be a good idea to use this time not only to train but to travel the world a bit. It would be a little dull to stay in the same place all of the time. We would have never left the Leaf Village if that was the case. He finished with a light shrug. What we really need to do is try and stay off of the Akatsuki's radar. Staying in one place might cause some unwanted trouble to come our way. I already cut it close by staying in Tenzaku Town for too long, can't make that rookie mistake again. Even though they had stayed in Tenzaku Town for nearly a month, the sage was confident that the Akatsuki had not found them. In a secluded forest like this, a month should be completely safe. Naruto nodded in reluctant acceptance. He had a feeling there was something that Jiraiya wasn't telling him but decided not to dwell on it. As long as he got to train, it really didn't make that much of a difference where they did it. Training was the only thing that mattered today. Jiraiya inwardly sighed in relief. Thank God he's dumb. Alright, pervy sage. The impatient student chirped. What super awesome jutsu are you going to teach me today? He was rocking side to side in anticipation. While the excitement was certainly there, Jiraiya noted that his protégé seemed a little different than usual. The Naruto he knew just a few short months ago would be in his face screaming that they should have started 15 minutes ago. This Naruto was far more reserved than he had expected. The Sannin smiled. Perhaps he's finally starting to take things seriously. Jiraiya was right, in a sense. Despite not realizing it, the whole process of writing a novel had changed the blonde's outlook on how a task should be completed. Had he gone in guns blazing, fully unprepared to write his novel, he would have failed miserably. However, the realization he had about being dumb and not having any writing skills at all was, quite possibly, the best thing that could have happened to him. Slowing things down, teaching himself the necessary tools to succeed, these were the keys to writing his novel. The boy didn't realize it, but he was carrying this methodology over into his training. Well, began the older man. You can start by not calling me pervy sage anymore. After all, I am your master and you should be showing me the proper respect. Naruto brought his hand up to his chin and squinted his eyes. I'll think about it, pervy sage. He answered after a short pause. Sigh, just start with a warm-up. Muttered the older leaf ninja. His eyes scanned over the entirety of the clearing. 50 laps should suffice. It was Naruto's turn to sigh. Fine. We'd better do some actual training next. He grumbled as he started to jog around the circumference of the clearing. Jiraiya, paying no attention to his student's grumblings, walked to the edge of the clearing and sat down against the trunk of a rather large tree. Time to start the fun part. He said to himself as he began reaching into his bag. Slowly, While also watching to make sure Naruto wasn't half-assing his warm-up, the sage took out the necessary materials for the next phase of the boy's training. A set of light ankle and wrists weights, some ink, and a brush. A wicked smile appeared across his face. The kid wants some hard training. Let's hope he doesn't regret those words. With the small brush now dipped in ink, he grabbed one of the 4 weights. Naruto, now on his 4th lap, sighed out of agonizing boredom. Despite really wanting to take his training as seriously as he could, jogging was not what he was expecting, or wanted. Muscles now warmed up to his liking, he scanned the area to find where his master had gone off to. He noticed Jiraiya sitting against a tree at the opposite end of the field. Deciding any time away from pointless running was well spent, he walked over to him. As he got closer, the genin noticed that Jiraiya was scribbling out some weird symbols that he did not recognize. "Hey, pervy sage!" he called out questioningly. "What are you doing?" He took a peek at what his sensei was drawing, hoping the closer distance would assist him in figuring out what those odd symbols were. His face scrunched up in confusion. What's with all the weird scribbles? Gesturing to the small weights now adorned with odd swirly patterns, he decided to not even ask about why the sage had such a creepy-looking smile on his face. Something told the blonde that whatever it was, he didn't want to know. "These aren't scribbles, brat," the older man retorted, slightly annoyed that the blonde did not recognize what he was doing. "This is Fuinjutsu, also known as the sealing arts." "Sealing, huh?" his student repeated in feigned understanding. Whatever it was, it looked kinda cool. Maybe that was something Jiraiya was gonna teach him. His excitement increased. "So what are those seals you're drawing for?" The sage finished writing the necessary seals on the last weight. He picked up all 4 at once and infused a bit of his chakra into the seals. That way, they would respond to his chakra when he wanted to activate them from a distance. "Why don't you put these on and find out?" Jiraiya's tone betrayed nothing, but on the inside, he was chuckling mischievously. Naruto nodded dumbly and took the weights from his sensei. Now, with a weight strapped to each limb, Naruto waited patiently for something cool to happen. The way Jiraiya was making Fuinjutsu sound, something cool was bound to happen, right? The blonde frowned. These felt like normal weights. The wrist weights were only a meager 5 pounds, and the ankle weights weren't much heavier. Naruto would venture to guess they weighed, at most, 10 pounds. Pervy sage, what is supposed to happen? Ha! Suddenly, it was as if Choji in his expanded form had just fallen on top of the blonde. Arms now swinging at his sides, it felt as if the ground was a magnet and the weights around his limbs were hunks of metal. He struggled mightily, muscles bulging in an effort to keep the boy's body upright. The initial shock of the massive increase in weight, however, was too much and he could no longer resist. The blonde crumpled to the ground. "What the hell are these?" he asked, head thrashing about in a vain attempt to help himself back up. "Those would be gravity seal," his master said with a humorous tone. "With the seals I put on those weights, I can freely manipulate the amount of gravitational force that is exerted on them. I can either choose to make them as light as a feather or heavy as a boulder. In other words, they are the perfect tool to use for your training." Had he not been pinned to the ground with what felt like hundreds of pounds of weight, Naruto would have found that explanation to be rather fascinating. For the time being, though, getting up to a standing position was the current objective. "That great and all," he said through grit teeth, still trying in vain to get up. "But, don't you think you should lighten these up a bit?" His anger, coupled with the very unthreatening position he was in, caused the Sannin to break out in uproarious laughter. Once calm, he obliged and reduced the gravitational force just enough to where the blonde should be able to stand under his own power. Naruto, now upright, shot his teacher a dirty look that carried the promise of pain the boy knew he couldn't deliver. "Whoops," his master said lamely, throwing his hands up in exaggerated surprise. "Perhaps I made them a bit too heavy." "You think?" the younger ninja said through gritted teeth. He tried to lift his arms up so he could strangle the bastard but to no avail. The weights were still too damn heavy for that. "How heavy are these anyway?" the blonde said, knees buckling slightly from the stress. "Right now the seals are set to about 8 times normal gravitational pull, give or take a few pounds. That means each wrist weight is roughly 40 pounds, and each ankle weight is somewhere around 80 pounds. That's a total of 240 pounds. The sage explained to his blonde student. He noticed the dubious reaction that his student gave and smiled. "You're the one who wanted this training, kid. Don't complain now that you have just what you asked for." His disciple grinned sheepishly at being called out. "Maybe you could reduce the weight a little bit more?" he asked hopefully. Jiraiya shook his head, swiftly dashing the blonde's hopes. "Go finish your laps, brat. I finished them already." He lied poorly in response. "No, you didn't. How do you know?" He attempted to point his finger accusingly at the sage, but his muscles wouldn't let him. "You didn't even watch me." Naruto was just simply waved off by his sensei. "You've got 46 laps left," he replied smugly. "Go finish them. And when you're done you're going to be doing agility drills and other movements to improve your overall maneuverability." Naruto began to open his mouth to speak but was quickly cut off. "Yes, with the weights on," his master said dryly. Naruto grumbled something about a sadistic old man and began to trudge through his laps. Jiraiya shook his head. "I guess the kid needs a little motivation," he thought to himself. "Naruto." The aforementioned blonde turned his head towards the sound, a scowl plastered on his face. "What? You know your friend? The one with the big eyebrows on Guy's team?" Naruto's scowl disappeared, confused by the turn the conversation took. His head now cocked to the side, perplexed. "You mean Bushy-brow? What about him? How do you think he got so fast?" To which Naruto shrugged. "He did something very similar to what I'm making you do. These weights are going to help you greatly increase your speed in a short amount of time. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if the next time you see your friend, you're even faster than he is. Not only that, but these weights are much more compact and won't restrict your movements like the bulky weights Guy uses." There was a tinge of pride in the sage's voice. Using his own ceiling design, he was confident that his method would be even more effective than the one employed by the Leaf Village's blue beast. Naruto's eyes lit up. Had he heard the older man correctly? Faster than Bushy-brow? He looked down at the weight strapped to his limbs. "Can these really make me that fast?" he thought to himself, astonished. His eyes hardened. "If that's true, I need to stop complaining and push through the strain. I need to get stronger." There's that gleam in his eye again. The sage mused. That was the same gleam the Sannin saw when he challenged Naruto to write a novel. If the outcome of that was any indication, this is about to get very interesting. Goofy Naruto was fun to be around, sure, but serious Naruto was something to marvel at. The determination the kid carries in his eyes. I don't know if I could ever bring myself to bet against him when he looks like that. He sat back down against the tree and just watched. "Are you proud of him, Minato? Kushina?" he wondered. Naruto grunted from the effort. Every step he took was a struggle, every swing of the arm to help with his momentum caused his biceps to strain. Only halfway through the 10th lap and his muscles were already begging him to stop. The only things that were keeping him going were the thought of all of his friends, and the desire to get strong enough to where he can protect those friends. "This is nothing," he grunted out in between steps. Jiraiya smirked. "Every exercise you do will push your mind and your body to the very limit." The sage made sure to speak loud enough that his protege could hear him on the other side of the field. "Even the most routine warm-ups are going to be so intense that your muscles are going to beg you to stop. Every time you think you're starting to get used to that weight, I'm going to double it. You're going to want to quit and I won't blame you." He stopped for a moment and allowed his words to sink in. "So, I ask you, do you still to continue?" he concluded, tone firm but not harsh. "Yes, I do." His lips turned up into a smirk at not being referred to as pervy sage. "Good. Come on," the 13-year-old said through grit teeth as he took yet another step. He was 49 laps down and still going. The blonde didn't even know how long he had been going for, or how he was still standing. The sun was no longer directly overhead, now at about 45 degrees. It's been at least a couple of hours. Wincing from the strain his body was under as he took another agonizing step. So much for this being a warm-up, he thought to himself bitterly. After nearly 3 hours of dragging himself around with the added weight, he felt his muscles beginning to adjust. That didn't make it any easier on his exhausted muscles, but it was a start. At least there was a somewhat noticeable level of improvement. "Ah!" he squealed, nearly tripped over his own feet. I'll be the luckiest person alive if I can get out of this training alive. Jiraiya wasn't kidding when he said this wasn't gonna be easy. After just one day of walking, this was one of the most difficult things he had ever done. Apparently, the genin was too deep into his own thoughts, he momentarily lost his, collapsing face first into the dirt. Jiraiya's student tried to push himself up with all of his remaining strength but to no avail. He was just too drained. Damn it. His eyes darted around the clearing, looking for the only man that could help him out of his predicament. Except, no one was there. Really? He exclaimed. Where the hell is that bastard? The blonde swore he was here just a moment ago. He stayed for the first 49 laps, but not the last one. I mean, who does that? The blonde was starting to get angry, head flailing about. When I find him, I'm going to kick his ass. He shouted in hopes that it would somehow reach the ears of his master. He thought for a moment. But first, I'm gonna need to stand. There's gotta be something. Eyes searching for anything to grab onto. A stick, a rock, a tree, anything. Nope, there was nothing even close to being within reach. If only I could move my arms to make some clones. They were only 40 pounds each, but it felt as though a boulder was on top of them. The genin could feel the necessary chakra swirling around within him, it was right there. Without the necessary hand seal, it just had nowhere to be directed. He closed his eyes and concentrated. His goal was to try and force the chakra out of his body. Would that solve his problem? Who knew, but no sense in not trying anything. Come on. The veins in his forehead bulged out from the effort. It's there if only I could just. Poof. Upon hearing the sound, his eyes snapped open in surprise. Looking to the left, then right, his eyes locked with another familiar pair of blue orbs. Standing beside him was, well, him. Could it be, a sealless clone? The clone blinked. He looked down at his hands, face scrunched up in confusion. After patting himself on the chest to confirm his solidity, he frowned. How am I here? He asked dumbly. The real Naruto, however, didn't even register his doppelganger's question. Something much more interesting caught his attention. You have weights on, too, don't you feel heavy? The clone didn't seem to have any difficulty standing. Ha! The clone threw a few mock punches and kicks, bouncing off his heels for added assurance. I guess not. He concluded. That's weird. I guess a clone of a seal doesn't exactly work like the original. Voice laced with uncertainty, Naruto silently thanked whatever deity that decided to bestow this good fortune upon him. Alright, help me up. I need to go find that jerk. Fine. The standing Naruto said, reaching down to pick up his bossy summoner. Damn, you're heavy. You've really let yourself go, you know that? The clone joked with a laugh. The original, whose arm was now slung over the other's shoulder, didn't laugh. You know, if I didn't need you, I would so hit you right now. Despite his good fortune for being able to summon a clone who could actually stand, Naruto was in no mood for jokes, even if they were technically his jokes. You mean if you could hit me you would so hit me right now? His snickering was silenced by a heavy fist. Poof, that'll teach me not to be such an ass. Now, body fully erected, the blonde could reflect on what had just happened. Anger now subsiding, he was overjoyed at what he had just accomplished. I made a clone without a seal. I didn't even know you could do that. The genin didn't know how he had done it, but he was sure of one thing. That was something that definitely needed to be looked into. Now I gotta go find that bastard. He grumbled to himself. Taking another step, he suddenly remembered just how hard it was for him to walk with his tired muscles. He glanced over at a very comfortable-looking spot in front of a tall tree. Now I gotta wait for that bastard to come back. Grumbling again as he walked in the direction of the tree. Chapter 6, Old Habits Die Hard. Only 5 laps today, Naruto. When the blonde had heard those words come out of the white-haired sage's mouth, he almost wept tears of utter joy. It had been a week since Jiraiya had introduced the chakra weights into Naruto's training, but this was the first day in which he wasn't required to do 50 laps for his warm-ups. Being happy was an understandable reaction, yes, but now the genin was beginning to feel different about the whole situation. Naruto, who was currently on his 4th out of 5 laps, was jogging at a very modest pace. This was a far cry from his first day using the weights and he was proud of the progress he was making so far. What is the reason he's only having me do 5 laps? Is something else going on today? Despite the great progress he had been making recently, he was currently unable to enjoy it because of the lighter warm-up. The blonde has known Jiraiya long enough that he rarely does things, if at all, without some sort of reasoning behind it. I guess the only thing I can do is wait and find out what he tries to kill me with next. He thought to himself as a drop of sweat rolled down his temple. This is ridiculous. The angry shout caused the genin's head to snap towards the direction of the offending sound. It was Jiraiya leaned up against a tree as always, with an irritated expression on his face. Upon closer inspection, his student noticed that the Sannin was angrily reading through a stack of papers. Wait a minute. The blonde said incredulously. He recognized those papers. That was a copy of the transcript for his book, which had been given to him when he received his publication confirmation letter from Jiraiya, now also his publisher. Naruto also noticed that one of his bags was open and many of his things had been removed and were laying on the floor. Steam comically began to pour out of his ears as he stomped over to confront his nosy mentor. Hey, asshole! The blunt boy yelled. What are you doing going through my stuff? You left it all out on the floor. It's gonna get dirty. If Jiraiya was a lot weaker and smaller, Naruto would definitely beat him up. Jiraiya, ignoring the blonde's outbursts how he usually does, matched his anger as he held up Naruto's transcript. What is this? What am I reading? He exclaimed, pointing a finger at the offending text. What do you mean? The genin shot back. This. Jiraiya dragged his finger across every inch of the page for emphasis. While he appeared animated and upset about something, the blonde was unable to determine what he was actually angry about. What's wrong with it? He said irritably. He had put a lot of effort into producing that book and he couldn't help but get a bit defensive when someone criticized it. Especially a giant pervert who only writes smut. Where do I begin? The older man said in exasperation. I'm already a few chapters in. Where's the romance? Or the drama? He rubbed his head in genuine confusion as he spoke, eyes filled what appeared to be a burning passion so intense Naruto could not make direct eye contact with him. How could a student of mine not know the first thing about writing a successful novel? He looked to his ward for answers. Naruto let out an irritated sigh as his anger levels dropped to considerably lower levels. He knew that this was going to happen eventually. After all, it was the super pervert he was dealing with. Pinching the bridge of his nose, he addressed his master's qualms. Maybe there are none of those elements in this story because it is not a romance novel. Did that ever cross your mind, perv? If Naruto was being honest with himself, he wasn't that offended by anything Jiraiya had said. If the complaint had been about the overall quality of writing, that would have been a different story. In this case, it was just Jiraiya being Jiraiya, something Naruto wholeheartedly accepted as reality at this point. How am I even supposed to write a novel about romance if I haven't even had a girlfriend, anyway? The sage raised his hand to answer the blonde's question. If the word research comes out of your mouth, I will write a letter to Granny Tsunade and she won't be happy about what I have to say. Jiraiya slowly lowered his hand. Aside from being his usual childish self, Jiraiya was acting a bit strange. To Naruto, what the older man was saying did not match what his eyes were telling him. The Sannin's eyes were conveying a different emotion, one that the blonde was unsure of. Maybe he was imagining the whole thing. The truth was that Jiraiya was trying to hide how he was truly feeling. In actuality, he was jealous of his young ward. The realization that he was jealous of his own student was making him feel a tad guilty. These negative feelings stemmed from the blonde's novel. Initially, Jiraiya did not have high expectations regarding the boy's writing capabilities. However, that completely changed when he got past the first chapter. The book was excellent, not that Jiraiya would ever admit that to anyone. He was incredibly proud of his student for discovering his talents for literature, that was not why he felt jealous. It was the book itself, or, more importantly, what it was about. The only action-adventure book featuring a heroic main character that the Sannin ever wrote was, to put it nicely, not commercially successful. It was a failure. A failure that led him to abandon that genre of writing altogether and, instead, write his romance novels. While his Ika Ika series was a success that made him rather wealthy, Tale of a Gutsy Ninja was something he poured his soul into like no other. He was bitter that people did not receive it as positively as he envisioned. He shook his head in an attempt to relieve his brain of the negative thoughts he was feeling. Looking back down at his protégé's transcript, he allowed himself a small smile. From the very beginning of the story, he had immediately noticed the similarities between its main character and his favorite little blonde. Knowing you, Naruto, I feel that this story may have a similar message to the one I tried to write all of those years ago. Instead of being envious like a bratty child, I'm going to hope that this story makes a difference in the world that I wish mine could have. Naruto, noticing his mentor's sudden change in expression, frowned in confusion. What is it now? He was starting to think that his sensei was bipolar. The man switched from upset to happy faster than Naruto could eat a bowl of miso ramen with extra pork. The weight of the world, why did you pick that for the title? Jiraiya, who was now looking at this disciple, asked with an even tone. Naruto was taken aback by the sudden question. Well, He took a moment to respond while he gathered his thoughts. The hero has to overcome so much, and so many people are relying on him. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person, you know. He finally answered. Do you ever feel like that? The genin's eyes widened slightly, then he rebounded quickly. What? Of course not. He puffed out his chest for effect. Nothing can ever get me down. I'm amazing, believe it. Proud smile ever present on his face. Jiraiya's gaze remained fixed on his student. It was obvious that while Naruto wished that was the truth, it wasn't the case. With the Akatsuki after him, Sasuke going rogue to join Orochimaru, and Naruto's vow to protect everyone precious to him, there was no genin alive who had more pressure on them than him. Just know that you can talk to me whenever you need it, okay? Sure. Voiced with a twinge of awkwardness. He wasn't used to Jiraiya acting like this. Although he wouldn't admit it to the perv, it felt rather comforting to hear him say that. I'm sorry for tossing all of your stuff on the ground, Naruto. The blonde blinked. Would it be okay if I could borrow this, so I can finish it? The sage said, gesturing to his student's novel. Why? The younger leaf ninja asked. He hadn't expected that question. You're my student, so I can't in good conscience let you write a second book without giving you critiques on the first. The older author had a toothy grin as he gave the younger novelist a big thumbs up. Naruto huffed. Whatever, if you can find any critiques, that is. He shot back. Jiraiya let out a bellowing laugh and placed the transcript beside him. That's the spirit, kid. He stood up and inspected his student closely. So, how are the weights feeling today? Are you getting adjusted to them? I'm pretty sure that my body is adjusting to the weight pretty well. Raising his arms above his head for emphasis. It's still hard as hell, but I can manage. I was even able to jog the entire 5 laps. The sage raised an eyebrow in response. He expected the boy's progress to be fast, however, he hadn't foreseen such rapid development. Instructing the blonde to complete 5 laps as quickly as possible, he had expected the child to be completely gassed by the end of it. He's not even breathing hard. An amazing feat for sure. Good. Maybe next month I can increase the amount of weight a little. A little? I thought you said you were going to double the weight every time I adjusted to it. There was confusion and relief evident in his voice. Mostly relief. Jiraiya waved dismissively in response. What, are you crazy? Who do I look like? Guy. Then what was that whole inspirational speech last week for? Oh, that? He said with a mischievous grin. I just enjoy scaring the crap out of you, brat. There was a slight pause. You know, every time I gain a little bit of respect for you, you find some dumb way to make me think less of you. He shook his head in slight disbelief. You're just an idiot, aren't you, pervy sage? Jiraiya hung his head in disappointment. Sometimes, he wished his student would start treating him with the respect a ninja as cool as him deserved. Strength feared by practically every ninja in every village across the entire world. And yet, the respect of his 13-year-old pupil constantly eluded his grasp. You may be a kid, but that doesn't mean your words don't sting. Feigned tears were streaming down the older rider's face. With his long, spiky hair he kind of looked like a depressed porcupine. So instead of trying to console his master he, being the nice guy that he is, started laughing at him. Okay, Naruto, Jiraiya spoke as if nothing happened. Maybe he was bipolar. Are you ready to start the next part of your training today? That's what I was just about to ask you about. The sage nodded for him to continue. How come you only had me do 5 laps today? Normally I do at least 50 laps and then we jump right into those weird drills you have me do. I'll tell you why. He began. You see, I wanted this first week to be about increasing your body's strength and speed. These two aspects are some of the most fundamental abilities a shinobi should have. The blonde nodded in understanding. However, I don't want to be doing the same thing every day. It is also important that we mix in other aspects of training as well. The body needs time to rest and can't do it if you carry around all that extra weight every day. The blonde was getting excited. Could this mean he was going to learn some super epic jutsu today? Okay, so what are we gonna do today? Voice not betraying his overflowing cheerfulness. You and I are going to spar. The boy's face fell immediately. Spar with Jiraiya, one of the legendary Sannin. Suddenly wishing he hadn't been so mean to his sensei, the blonde audibly gulped. How exactly is sparring with you going to make me better? You're so much stronger than me. The older man waved off his student's apprehensions. I'm not going to kill you, kid. The reason we're going to spar is, so I can evaluate your taijutsu. Naruto's eyes lit up in realization. So, the weights were for. Exactly. His master confirmed. We're going to build up your strength and speed for while also improving your taijutsu at the same time. He made a quick hand sign. Ha! The genin felt the difference immediately. Since the weights had been activated for 7 consecutive days, he had almost forgotten what his normal weight felt like. Being 300 pounds lighter, he didn't feel heavy anymore. In fact, it was almost as if he was floating. Whoa! He exclaimed. This feels so much better. Bouncing around and throwing a few mock punches and kicks for display, Jiraiya took a piece of paper out of his pocket and began reading off of it. 3 days out of the week you will be working on your strength and speed using the weights. Those days will consist of things similar to what I've had you do for the past week. However, there will also be another 3 days where we will be working on your taijutsu. What about the 7th day? Asked the boy. That, Jiraiya said, turning the paper around to show his ward. Will be a hybrid training session. Naruto squinted as he read his sensei's odd handwriting. The paper had all 7 days of the week written on it. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday were circled, while Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday were enclosed by a square. Lastly, Sunday was enclosed by both a square and a circle. Today was Tuesday, so based on that information he concluded that squares meant taijutsu and circles meant weighted training. What exactly do you mean by a hybrid session? He asked, slightly confused. A little bit of both in one day? Not quite. Responded the older man. During hybrid sessions, you'll be practicing your taijutsu while wearing your chakra weights. The blonde's eyes widened slightly. Because of the fluid and explosive movements executed during combat, wearing weights at the same time will help strengthen muscles that you aren't even aware that you have. If hybrid training is so effective, how come we don't do it every day? While it certainly didn't sound fun, if it got him the results he wanted, then so be it. Ah, good question. The sage acknowledged. It's because of how physically exhausting it'll be on your body. If your body can handle it in the future, we may increase the number of days to 2 or 3, but for now, we'll start with 1. The blonde nodded in understanding. Are you ready? Jiraiya asked as he lowered into a defensive stance. Naruto's face paled slightly. Why do I need to fight you? Why can't I just spar with my clones? If there was an alternative to fighting a Sannin, the boy would most assuredly take it. Jiraiya chuckled, much to the annoyance of the blonde. He wasn't going to get out of this that easily. I need to see your taijutsu firsthand. That way it will be much easier for me to be able to correct your form. Or change it entirely. He mentally added. The young author's eyes narrowed suspiciously. He knew that that wasn't the main reason. The sage could easily watch he and his clones fight and correct his form that way. Sounds like he just wants to mess with me a little. Fine. The student said after a short pause. In reality, he knew that he needed to fix his taijutsu. It was subpar at best. Okay, maybe he was giving himself a little too much credit. He sucked at taijutsu. Jiraiya nodded and lowered back into his stance. While he was certainly going to have his fun, evaluating the boy's hand-to-hand combat abilities were the most important thing at the moment. Oh, and by the way. You can't use shadow clones. What? He shouted incredulously. Why not? His clones were incorporated heavily into his own unique style of taijutsu. Being unable to use his best weapon puts him at an even bigger disadvantage than he was already at. Jiraiya sighed. Listen, kid. You can't always be constantly relying on your clones to do all the work. Voice stern and unbending. Shadow clones are a great tool in your arsenal, but you are using them the wrong way. Naruto was confused. What do you mean the wrong way? They're a crutch. You've been using your clones to hide your deficiencies. Your taijutsu isn't that good, so you use clones to try and overwhelm your opponent. You can't make a Rasengan by yourself, so you use a clone to rotate the chakra for you. He continued. What I want us to do is to strengthen those deficiencies, so you don't have to spend exorbitant amounts of chakra to even out the playing field with your opponent by using clones. Imagine what you could do with all of that extra chakra that wouldn't be wasted on unnecessary clones. While Naruto was slightly hurt by the words, he understood what his master was saying. And he even agreed with him. In reality, when something took too much effort for the boy to completely master, he used clones to patch up the holes in his skill set. It was a habit that he wasn't even aware he had. Jiraiya suddenly disappeared, snapping him back to reality. He appeared in front of the blonde, aiming a kick at his chest. Acting solely on his reflexes, he crossed his arms in front of himself as a guard. The force of the kick, which was much stronger than the blonde had anticipated, sent him tumbling through the air. The ground did little to soften the boy's landing as he skidded to a painful stop. I didn't even see him move. He thought to himself frantically as he began to pick himself up. Don't expect your opponent to just wait for you. The sage was forced to yell due to the now great distance that was between the two of them. You must be prepared at all times. Naruto sighed. His master could be a real slave driver when he wanted to be. This is what I asked for, though. I know I'll get a lot stronger if all of the training is like this. His eyes widened as a shadow appeared at his feet. And it was quickly getting bigger. He contorted his body just enough so that he barely managed to dodge the foot that landed where his body had just been. The sheer force cracked the ground beneath them and sent a small vibration throughout his body. He rolled away and scrambled to his feet as quickly as he could. Without even thinking about it, his hand flew into his signature seal. Realizing that he was about to use his clones, he forced himself to stop, and instead, summoned forth a string of curses. Damn it! He thought angrily while looking at his hands. I really do rely on my clones too much. Is there a problem, Naruto? He heard Jiraiya call out to him. Without even looking up at the sage, he could already see that smug, I told you so, smirk that he would occasionally wear. Naruto clenched his hands so hard that they nearly shook. He always thought that he was a pretty well-rounded ninja, except for his genjutsu. But it turns out that he wasn't. While everyone around him was getting stronger and learning new things, he was stuck relying on the same two techniques to win all of his battles. The Rasengan and Shadow clones. And he couldn't even make a decent Rasengan, or passable taijutsu, without the use of his clones. He was one-dimensional, and he knew it. It wasn't hopeless, though. That's what he was training with one of the Sannin for. A Sannin that already identified something he himself hadn't even thought about. A smirk appeared across his face. I'm finally learning some useful stuff. No, sensei. There's no problem. He knew he needed to get stronger as fast as possible. That meant dwelling on the negative, when it would do him no good, would be useless. Jiraiya's eyebrow rose, but he didn't say anything. Well, more accurately, he couldn't say anything. His student had actually called him sensei for what might have been the first time. He couldn't believe it. He did his best to not mention or make a big deal about it, hoping that saying nothing would finally mean the end of pervy sage. Naruto threw himself at the sage with everything that he had. If he wanted to get even one hit on his master in, he would have to go all out. With his noticeably increased speed, he aimed a punch at the Sannin's gut. Jiraiya blocked it with an open palm and was almost surprised by how much power was behind it. Not bad. He appraised. But you'll need more than just a little power to beat me. Naruto growled in response to the taunt. Dropping to the ground, he kicked his foot out for a leg sweep. Jiraiya was 2 steps ahead of him and easily jumped over it. Naruto smirked. The blonde twisted his body and planted his arms on the ground. He threw a powerful kick upwards, aimed at his teacher's sternum. It was met by Jiraiya's patiently awaiting guard, but with nothing to resist the force of the kick except for gravity, he was launched into the air. Naruto quickly followed him into the air, trying to capitalize on his slight advantage. Just as he got in reach, the sage recovered and brought his fists down on the stunned Genin's head. Spiraling to the ground with no hopes of stopping, he was barely able to shift his body enough so as not to land on his head. His back slammed into the unforgiving ground, causing a grunt of pain to escape his lips. Picking himself up, he watched his sensei land lightly a few yards away from him. The blonde appeared to be favoring his right shoulder but was otherwise in good shape. Reaching for his kunai pouch, he hesitated. I don't know if I can use kunai or shuriken. Instead, he discreetly took out 2 smoke bombs from his pouch and quickly tried to formulate a plan. Before he could even use them, his opponent appeared in front of him. As I said, don't expect your opponent to wait for you. Startled, the boy accidentally dropped both of the bombs. They went off, forming a rather large cloud of black smoke. Jiraiya, surprised, coughed as he unexpectedly inhaled some of the smoke. Naruto, now aware of where his sensei was, threw several punches and kicks in his direction. Despite not being able to see, Jiraiya parried every single one. The blonde strikes weren't fast enough and he was able to tell by the shifting of the smoke where they were coming from. Naruto grunted in frustration and leaped out of the smoke. Jiraiya followed in pursuit. He was putting constant pressure on his student. Naruto stopped and feinted with his right hand and threw a straight left at his opponent's chest. The punch was far too telegraphed, and the sage sidestepped it. He retaliated with a knee aimed for his student's gut. With Naruto's increased strength, he slammed his palms down on the rising knee, forcing a surprised Jiraiya to stumble forward. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the blonde launched forward and slammed the top of his head into Jiraiya's chin. Bang! The strike found its mark and Naruto almost began to celebrate, only for Jiraiya to disappear in a cloud of smoke, replaced by a wooden log. Hey! He pointed a finger accusingly at the offending piece of wood. What the hell? No ninjutsu during taijutsu only sparring. Jiraiya, who was walking out from behind a tree, could only grin sheepishly. I don't know what you're talking about, Blondie. The blonde huffed in annoyance at his teacher's dirty trick. He lowered back into his stance but was waved off by his senior. That's enough for now, Naruto. Upon hearing those words, the blonde's apparent fatigue began to catch up with him. He sat down to rest a little. How did I do? There was genuine curiosity in his voice. Considering he was a second away from breaking his teacher's jaw, his performance was better than even his wildest expectations. You did a lot better than I expected, kid. His mentor said with a big grin. Even though it has only been a week, I can already see and feel the difference that those weights have had on your speed and strength. I underestimated you towards the end, there. Naruto nodded in agreement. I definitely noticed a difference too. He looked at the deactivated weights on his limbs with a newfound appreciation. No wonder Bushy Brow was able to get so fast. He said aloud, more to himself than to Jiraiya. However, the sage continued. That doesn't mean that there is no room for improvement. Naruto frowned. What do you mean? I thought I did pretty good. Jiraiya smirked at his protégé's defensiveness. You're too wild when you fight. You have to work on being more patient and controlled. Jiraiya rubbed his chin, thankful he avoided losing some teeth from his dense-headed godson's headbutt. You're very unorthodox, so I think in the future we are going to work on your counter-striking. That, mixed with your unorthodox attacks, will give your opponents fits. I think it's fine the way it is. He grumbled to himself. It's always worked for me before. That was before, this is now. Naruto was startled by the sudden increase in volume. You have S-ranked ninja looking for you, ninja as strong, if not stronger than me. Lashing out and hoping to hit something is only going to get you killed. Naruto, who was about to retort, closed his mouth. The sage was right, and he knew it. With everyone in the Akatsuki potentially being on the same level as people like Orochimaru, he would have to improve drastically in every facet of his abilities. The student sent back a weak nod of confirmation. He was both nervous and excited about the prospect of facing off against the Akatsuki. Remembering his first encounter with Itachi and the man who looked like a shark sent shivers down his spine. Good. The older man responded simply. Naruto shifted, unsure of what was coming next. So, what are we going to do, Ha! Wadash, ah. With the weights now activated again, the surprised blonde crumpled to the ground. What the hell, you bastard? I thought you said no weights today. Naruto struggled to move, quickly finding out he was unable to. And this is way more than the usual weight. He noticed his master's big smile. How can you go from super serious to a big idiot in just a few seconds? Let me up. Jiraiya let out a bark of laughter and wiped a single tear from the corner of his eye, all while ignoring the vulgar language of his student. Man, that never gets old, he said with a wide grin. I said let me up. The angry child repeated. Once you get up, I'll deactivate them. Hurry up, I have a few taijutsu scrolls I want to show you. After nearly a minute of watching his ward struggle to get to his feet, he was getting a little impatient. Hey! Get up lazy, we don't have all day. His godson just grumbled in response, still valiantly attempted to stand up. If you don't soon, I'm going to increase the weight. How the hell is that going to help anything? -3 months later. Poof, heh, there's only 5 left. A very beat-up Naruto said proudly after dispelling another copy of himself. You shouldn't be acting so smug. Jiraiya shouted, sitting atop a high tree branch, resting his back against its trunk. You look like total crap. Naruto ignored his sensei and shifted his attention to the 5 remaining clones. He knew his teacher was just messing with him, he was just too exhausted to care. The reason he was so worn out from just battling his clones was that it was Sunday. For the past 3 months, every Sunday consisted of his hybrid sessions, where he would usually fight his clones while weighed down by hundreds of pounds of gravitationally augmented training weights. As he found out before, clones of seals did not abide by the same restrictions of the original, making his shadow clones very difficult sparring partners perfect for his hybrid training. Yeah. One of the Narutos snickered. You do look like crap. The original didn't appreciate that tone in the slightest. He decided the obnoxious one would be his next victim. Lunging, his muscles burned from carrying all of the extra weight for so long, but he ignored it. The punch he threw was rather sluggish and the much faster clone dodged it easily. With all the weight the original was swinging around blocking proved completely ineffective, something a few poor clones had found out in the beginning. Because of this, they were forced to evade their summoner's strikes. The doppelganger countered with a barrage of fast punches, putting the real blonde on defense. With great difficulty, he was able to block and parry most of the punches. What few blows found their mark were merely light grazes the slower blonde couldn't completely evade. A second clone leaped behind him, hoping to take him out and end the battle right there. The much heavier genin smirked. Just as the clone was about to land on him and declare victory, his target sidestepped and grabbed the surprised clone's arm as he sailed past him. With all of his strength, he swung the clone around and hit the copy of himself he had just been trading blows with. This exchange resulted in 2 very satisfying poofs. 3 left. He thought to himself. 50 clones were whittled down to 3 in just under 2 hours and the ones remaining did not want to join the other 47. They jumped at him from different directions as a last-ditch attempt to win. Naruto's eyes were wide with fear and the clones were sure that he would not be able to evade all 3 of them. He wasn't fast enough. Instead of panicking, the blonde simply reacted. Pumping his legs full of his remaining chakra, he leaped high into the air. The clones' eyes widened simultaneously in shock. Unable to alter their trajectory, they crashed headfirst into one another. Poof! Naruto landed on his back with a resounding thud several feet away from where he had been. He was so heavy that the ground cracked beneath him upon impact. Having finally won, the genin would have let out a cheer if a groan hadn't escaped his lips first. Jiraiya dropped down next to him. I think that's the first time you've beaten all of them. His master said proudly. It's especially impressive considering we only bumped up the weight a week or 2 ago. Damn it, sensei. His pupil said through grit teeth. Just how much did you increase the weight by, anyway? I think you're at about 14 times gravity, now. Meaning that the weights are totaling around 420 pounds. The sage said after some thought. Naruto, despite the pain he was feeling, smiled in response. I finally beat all 50 of them. I told you I'd do it today. His teacher rolled his eyes in annoyance. You've been saying the same thing for almost 2 weeks now. Of course, it was eventually going to come true. The collapsed blonde chuckled. Doesn't matter. I still did it. That you did. He confirmed. And I have to say, using your clones like this was a really good idea. Yeah, I know. The young author said as he got up to his feet. Not only are they worthy sparring partners when I'm weighed down, but I think the experience I get from them is helping me improve my taijutsu that much faster. So far, in the 3 months, since he had started his training, Naruto has noticed massive changes in his physique. Once a scrawny, malnourished-looking squirt, he was packing on muscle at an alarming rate. Jiraiya told him that it wasn't only because he was training heavy, but because he was eating more than just ramen. Lean meats and nutrient-dense vegetables were some of the foods the sage insisted his student eat after every training session. However, the genin thought he was just saying that to trick the blonde into eating foods that were better for him. Strength and speed were also something that increased exponentially. When his weights were deactivated on his taijutsu days, he felt light as a feather. Despite that, his punches generated a lot of force. Enough to the point that Jiraiya couldn't lazily block his punches anymore without hurting the palms of his hands. Lastly, his taijutsu was much more polished than it had been before. While it was a far cry from being complete in the Sanin's eyes, he was working on becoming a more patient, counter-striking type fighter, and it was showing. If he kept getting stronger at this pace, he couldn't even imagine what he would be like by the time he returned to the village. Currently, they were using a clearing on the southeastern edge of the Land of Fire, about 20 or so miles from the open waters that would take a person straight to the Land of Water. The sage and student had been there for about 3 weeks, so it was once again almost time to begin to pack up their things and continue on their adventure. Kid. Naruto looked up at his teacher, who was sporting a proud smile. You're coming along great. Naruto put his hands behind his head and returned the smile. So good, in fact, I think you've deserved the rest of the day off. The Sannin made a hand sign, and the blonde sighed in relief as he became several hundreds of pounds lighter. This caused Naruto's eyes to sparkle in gratitude, but his sensei didn't want him to get too comfortable. Don't get too cocky, though. We start right back up in the morning with weighted training. Naruto swiftly nodded in agreement. I'm gonna celebrate with some instant ramen. Now that Jiraiya complained whenever he ate ramen too much, the blonde usually saved it for times he felt were special occasions. That's all you ate for the first month, how do you still have more of that stuff packed with you? His master asked incredulously. I bought a ton of it before we left Tenzaku town. His ward answered simply. Since you haven't been letting me eat it as much, I still have some left in my bag. The blonde realized something. Something of the utmost importance. Speaking of which, when are we going to be camped near a town? I'll need to buy more soon. Funny you mention that. The older man acknowledged. I was thinking that we should head up north in the next week. What's north? The land of hot water. More specifically, the village hidden in hot water. Naruto's eyes narrowed. That village was known more as a tourist spot than a hidden village. A tourist spot with a lot of hot springs and pretty women. Hey! He pointed an accusing finger at his sensei. You better not be thinking of perving around when you said you were gonna put all of your attention into training me. The white-haired man began to sob. I wish. His continued weeping was similar to a dog being told he couldn't go for a walk outside. The progress of my next Ika book is coming along rather slowly, by my word is my word, and I intend to keep it. So, that's not what this is for? He asked, still suspicious of his sensei's intentions. It will be perfect for someone whose training is hard as you. Naruto's ear perked up in sudden interest. The hot springs will relax and soothe your body's muscles, allowing you to recover faster. Have you been feeling extra sore, as of late? The blonde rotated his shoulder and grimaced. Now that Jiraiya mentioned it, everything ached. When they had first begun their training a few months ago, he was sore, but not to this extent. Feeling crappy was just something he had grown accustomed to feeling when he woke up in the morning. Actually, yeah. With all the work you've been doing these past months, it's put some wear and tear on your body. However, I don't want us to lower the intensity of your training, because I believe the progress you're making is too good to stop. He explained. A month of using the hot springs after long days of difficult training will give your body some much needed TLC, while we train at the same time. Sounds good to me. It'd be great if we could stop by the Land of Waves, too. It's on the way and I have some friends there that I haven't seen in a while. Jiraiya was about to reply, but something made him stop. He felt uneasy. Everything in his body was screaming at him that something was wrong. The rate of his heartbeat quickened slightly. What is that? He thought, remaining outwardly calm as not to worry his student. His eyes scanned their training ground, but he could not detect anything. Slowly, the feeling began to go away. He glanced over at his ward, who was already starting a fire to heat the water for his instant ramen. The look of excitement and innocence on his godson's face only further allowed him to calm down. Am I going crazy? We found you. A voice said from the trees surrounding them. Jiraiya, and now even Naruto, were on full alert as several figures busted through the dense forest. What are you doing here? How did you find this place? There were 8 men, each wearing identical black cloaks and different masks that appeared to represent animals. A man with a bear mask stepped forward with a scroll in hand. Lady Hokage recently received an update from one of your contacts. She has requested your assistance on an S-rank mission. The man said with an even tone. Having been recently tasked giving Naruto his full attention while they were away, he relinquished most of his duties regarding his spy network to the village. While he had sent his messenger toads out once or twice in the past few months, he mostly stayed uninvolved and allowed the ANBU assigned directly to the Hokage to meet with his contacts. Couldn't let that rat Danzo get his hands on his network of informants. The Sannin took the scroll and began to open it. I'll ask again, how were you able to find us here? He began to scan the scrolls while waiting for an answer to his question. The ANBU member shifted uncomfortably. It's not every day you have to deal with a displeased Sannin. The Hokage was bad enough. Lady Hokage was very determined in finding you. So determined, in fact, that she asked the toads where you were currently located. We came right away. Pa ratted me out. He grumbled to himself more than to anyone who happened to be listening. Coming back to reality, he continued reading the scroll from Tsunade. His eyes widened. According to one of your informants, there has been some unusual movement by the Akatsuki around the location of the village hidden hot water. I know that you have your hands full with Naruto, but because the hot water village has demilitarized itself as of late, they do not have the manpower to appropriately react to an Akatsuki attack. Also, they know of your reputation and will only settle for you to undertake this mission. I wouldn't have contacted you otherwise. Tell Naruto that I'm sorry, but they are our allies and if the Akatsuki are involved we must act. Jiraiya sighed in annoyance. Guess I wasn't going crazy, after all. He mused to himself. Several meters away, this time unnoticed by Jiraiya, something rose up from the trees in the dense forest outside of the training grounds. When the Sannin stopped moving and began to scan the area he thought he had been found out. Thankfully, the ANBU swooped in like the idiots they are and stopped a near disaster. The strange being eyed the group, eyes eventually falling on a blonde clad in an orange jumpsuit. Face twisted in a cruel smile, his lowered himself back down, disappearing back into the tree. No trace of him left. Chapter 7, Foggy Memories. A man was sitting at a desk drumming his fingers along the table. The man was bald and had black eyes, a black beard, and black eyebrows. Above his right eyebrow and on his right cheek, he has 2 big scars. His attire consisted of a light gray cloak with black buttons. He was staring at a page in a book which had the picture of a much older man with gray hair and glasses. Being there for what seemed like too long, he let out a yawn. He closed the book. Waiting around for something to happen usually made up most of his day. There was a soft click that caught the man's attention. He glanced over at the wall and on cue, a section of the wall fell over. Through it walked a rather tall man, half of his face covered by a gray mask. He had what appeared to be blood staining the left sleeve of his cloak. Hm. The bald man's lips curved upward into what appeared to be a small smirk. He recognized this man. You are one of the last people I expected to see. What are you doing here? He had a deep, almost friendly voice. You know, just in the area. The taller man's voice was deep and gruff, differing drastically to the man who remained seated. He wasn't looking at the man who asked him the question, his cautious eyes were too busy scanning the room for potential threats. It was a habit that someone who lived his kind of lifestyle needed to adopt to stay alive. Not out of fear, but necessity. It's just me. I know. Last time you were here, you said it would be a long time before I saw you again. Despite being before an intimidating presence, the scarred man seemed relaxed. That was supposed to be the plan, but some things have changed. Gruff voice betraying no emotion. Changed how? The bald man pressed. Being holed up in this room for most of the day, every day, any kind of conversation or stimulation he could get was much appreciated. I'm on my way to meet someone. The visitor's responses remained vague. It was not because he was trying to hide something, he just was a man of few words. Because I'll be in that area, I was wondering if you had any work for me, Zangiai. Is that what you're calling it, now? The man now referred to as Zangiai allowed himself a small chuckle. Where is it that you're heading? Southeast. The masked man replied. Zangiai was used to this. The man had never been much of a talker. Southeast, huh? I may have one. He reopened the book and began flipping through its pages. Land of lightning, no. Land of water, no. Hidden stone village, no, he said aloud as he looked for the appropriate page. He flipped to the page that he had happened to be staring at earlier. Ah. Here it is. He turned the book around so the mysterious visitor could see. It isn't anything too special, but it's something at the very least. The mysterious visitor eyed the page, memorizing it instantly. He never forgot a face. Doing this for so long, forgetting things was something that you just couldn't do. Only 250,000. Had it been any other man, you would have been able to hear the displeasure in their voice, but his tone almost always remained the same. As I said, nothing too special. The bald man repeated. This is all I have in that area. This seems like an easy 250,000. Why hasn't this been taken by someone already? He wasn't wary, just mildly interested. A rather large group of bandits had apparently tried a few months back. A lot of them didn't survive. No one else wants to take it. They think it isn't worth the money. He explained. I wouldn't be surprised if it never got taken. Normally, I wouldn't take something that had such a small reward, but I guess the circumstances are not exactly normal. Zangiai chose to remain silent, allowing the much larger man to continue. Tell whoever put it up that I'm doing it, but for 500,000. Zangiai could tell just from the man's voice that he was not asking. He should consider himself lucky, if not for me this work would go undone, even for 500,000. He is lucky I don't charge him more. A drop of sweat rolled down the man's forehead, catching itself in his scarred brow. I will make sure he gets your message. Zangiai, despite having a rather friendly business relationship with his current guest, was smart enough to choose his words carefully when around him. He valued his life. Good. Was his simple reply as he walked towards the opening in the wall. He stopped walking and turned around. Make it fast, this won't take long. If he has an issue with my terms, well, he and I will have a conversation about it when I'm done. Zangiai swiftly nodded as he watched the man walk out and the wall lift back up to close behind him. He breathed a heavy sigh of relief. Such intensity. Location, southeastern land of fire. The blonde genin, who was currently slurping down the last of his instant noodles and salty broth, was watching Jiraiya and the ANBU talk from a decent distance away. He couldn't hear what any of them were saying, but based on his master's expression, it was pretty serious. The sage's expression suddenly changed after reading through a scroll that one of the ANBU had handed to him. I wonder what's going on. Curiosity now piqued, he put down the now finished cup of instant ramen and made his way over to the adults. What's going on? He asked innocently, mild amounts of concern present in his voice. Jiraiya, still processing everything that he was being told, barely heard his protégé's question. He turned to him, absent-mindedly tucking the scroll he had been reading into one of his pockets. He asked before his brain was able to process what was said. Oh, it appears I'm being assigned to an emergency mission from Tsunade. He explained vaguely. Naruto's brow furrowed in confusion. A mission? But Granny Tsunade knows that you're supposed to be training me. Why would she assign you to a mission? Something seemed a little off to the Uzumaki, but he wasn't sure what. It appears I was specifically requested to handle this mission. It's an important S-rank mission, and since I've completed over 130 S-rank missions, I guess my reputation precedes me. He puffed out his chest, completing his boast. Technically it wasn't a lie, just an omission of the entire truth. Jiraiya is the most prolific and active ninja currently alive in the Hidden Leaf Village. With over 1,000 completed missions under his belt, his abilities are recognized by many across the shinobi world. While upset for their training being cut short, Naruto had the sudden realization that he might be able to tag along with Jiraiya on this super important, high-profile mission. The thought of being able to test out some of the new strength he gained excited him. Jiraiya saw his student's reaction and was quick to shut down that type of thinking. Not a chance, kid. The blonde blinked, his lips curving slightly to form a small frown. This is going to be a dangerous mission. You're only a genin, there's no way you can come with me. The stern look the Sannin gave him quickly crushed his hopes. But, why? He asked in an attempt to persuade his teacher. I've been on dangerous missions before. Why is this one any different? Because I said so. To which the blonde rolled his eyes in annoyance. In actuality, Jiraiya could not let Naruto go on this mission with the possibility that the Akatsuki could show up. Sure, the Toad Sage was confident in his abilities to take on one, maybe two members at the same time, but the risk that more of them could be in the area surrounding the land of hot water made it too risky to bring his godson with him. Besides, even if he could take on Akatsuki members, doing that while also watching out for Naruto's well-being would be a tall task even for him. Also, the Akatsuki being spotted in an area not only too close for comfort to their current location but also where he and the blonde were about to go, made him uneasy. In this instance, caution was necessary to ensure the safety of his ward. Naruto just grumbled something about unfair adults. It shouldn't take long, Naruto. He attempted to reassure his student. Jiraiya was hopeful that all he would have to do is meet with his contact and clarify a few things. This was clearly either a misunderstanding or incorrect information. According to some very reliable intel he received a while back, the Akatsuki wasn't supposed to make much noise for another couple of years. Why would they suddenly move now, of all times? It didn't make sense, especially around the land of hot water. Then, if you're going to go on this mission, what about me? He asked the white-haired sage. You're supposed to be my protection, too. That is why we are here. The ANBU member with a bear mask spoke with a monotonous tone. He seemed to be the leader of the small team of elite ninja. We are the ANBU assigned directly to the Hokage herself. Our mission is to ensure your safety. They had been standing there so silently that the blonde had forgotten they even existed. Naruto looked at the 8 intimidating figures that joined him and his master in the clearing. One, in particular, caught his attention above all of the others. The ANBU member was wearing a mask that resembled that of a cat with green and red markings. The blonde wasn't sure why, but there was something different about him, he could feel it. Similar to the other cloaked figures, however, the cat ANBU exuded a quiet intensity. Even though their seriousness and intensity made him uncomfortable, they looked pretty strong. Strong enough to protect him in case anything goes wrong. The blonde nodded, seemingly content with their answer to his question. So, are you guys taking me to that place? His eyes squinted in thought as he tried to remember where Jiraiya said they were going. The village hidden in hot water? It was Jiraiya's turn to chime in. No, Naruto. When I'm done with this mission maybe we'll be able to go there, but not right now. Why not? The genin asked, slightly disappointed at not being able to relax in the hot spring. Because, we can only stay in one place for so long, remember? If you're there but we aren't doing any meaningful training, then it's just a waste of a great training location. Again, partially truthful, partially deceitful. While that explanation made perfect sense, it was obvious that ANBU bodyguards or not, it was too dangerous for him to be there right now. Well, then where am I supposed to go? We've already been here for quite a bit, isn't it time to move? The blonde made a good point. That was something that hadn't even crossed the sage's mind. He was too busy focusing on the mission just assigned to him. Jiraiya suddenly remembered something his protege had said earlier. You said you had some friends you wanted to visit in the land of waves. To which the blonde swiftly nodded in agreeance. You can stay there. It's on the way to where I'm going so I can travel with you until we reach it. Think of it as a small vacation from all of the hard work you've put in over the past few months. The 13-year-old's eyes lit up. The thought of being able to see Inari, Old Man Tazuna, and Tsunami almost made him completely forget about the hot water village and Jiraiya's secret mission. Not only that, but taking a break from training for a couple of days was music to the blonde's ears. Jiraiya smiled. Either he knew exactly what to say to his student, or the boy was just really easy to distract sometimes. Let's pack up our stuff, Naruto. Your friends are waiting for you. Shortly after, Naruto and Jiraiya had packed up all of their belongings and set off for the Land of Waves with an ANBU escort. At first, they moved swiftly in hopes of getting to their destination before nightfall. Now that they were close and making good time, they slowed down their pace to a hurried walk. Student and teacher were walking side by side with the ANBU team split up into two groups of four. Four were positioned behind the genin and sage, and four were in front of them. Naruto glanced behind him. His gaze was returned by the ANBU member who adorned the cat mask with the green and red markings. This alone shouldn't have seemed out of the ordinary. After all, the ANBU unit was tasked with ensuring the safety of the young blonde. What made it strange was that out of all of the 8 members, the cat was the only one that was staring at him. Is something wrong, Naruto Uzumaki? The masked man said after Naruto had been staring back at him for some time. The way the man spoke caused Naruto to shudder, though he didn't know why. Something about this ANBU member gave him the creeps. And no. He sputtered out. Everything is fine, cat guy. He finished lamely after being unsure of what to call him. Call me Udo. The man said after a short pause in the same creepy tone. That was odd. To the genin, it almost seemed like the man was unsure of what to call himself. Naruto just nodded weakly as his head snapped back in the direction he was walking. He leaned to his right where his mentor was standing and began to whisper. Do I really have to stay with these guys? Some of them are pretty creepy. He pleaded. The Sannin sighed. Yes, you do. To which Naruto frowned. They aren't that bad, they just take their work more seriously than you or I. Didn't you know that Kakashi used to be an ANBU captain? Really? The blonde asked, completely surprised. Yes, really. There's nothing to be worried about. Kakashi isn't that weird, right? He rested his hand on top of his godson's spiky-haired head. We're coming up on your destination now, so it's time I go meet with my contact. Naruto sighed but nodded reluctantly. Make sure you come back fast so we can start training again. The sage's student mentally berated himself. He wanted to say a lot more than that. What Naruto really wanted to tell his sensei was that he wished him good luck on his mission and that he hoped he came back safe. For some reason, however, his brain couldn't find the right words. Jiraiya chuckled, unaware of the blonde's inward conflict. I will, kid. But don't think that just because I'm away you won't be training at all. The sage flashed a toothy grin. Can't have you slacking and getting rusty while I'm away. Naruto huffed. I know. You told me already, perv. He retorted while crossing his arms across his chest. And remember. Jiraiya's voice grew more serious. Remember what I said. No more than 5 clones for at most 3 hours at a time. Naruto, also growing more serious, nodded in understanding. Good. His master flashed a confident thumbs up. See ya. As he disappeared in a plume of smoke. It would soon be dark out, the sky was a beautiful orange hue as the sun was slowly disappearing over the horizon. If the blonde had to guess, it was about 7 p.m. Due to it being later in the day, the bridge did not have anyone walking on it. Unbeknownst to the Uzumaki, the daytime traffic the bridge saw was filled with those importing and exporting goods out of the village. The money this brought in was substantial. In short, it was a huge success for Tazuna and the Land of Waves as a whole. The Great Naruto Bridge. The Uzumaki rubbed his eyes, assuming that doing so would cause the words he was reading to change into what they were supposed to be. He opened his eyes back up. They were still the same. He felt something well up in his chest, unsure of what to think or how to feel in this moment. On one hand, he felt honored that the people of the Land of Waves would name the most important thing their village ever produced after his namesake. On the other hand, he felt guilty about it. In his opinion, he was not the most important factor in the struggle against Gato. If anything, they should have named it after Kakashi-sensei. He thought to himself, unaware of how his passion and determination inspired Inari and the rest of the citizens of the land to finally stand up to their oppressor. Are you alright, Naruto Uzumaki? One of his personal bodyguards, who wore a mask that depicted a fierce lion, asked. Why yeah. He sputtered out in response. Just a little shocked is all. I didn't know that they named this bridge after me. The man named Udo decided to chime in this time. Ah, yes. The Black Ops are very aware of the mission you had in this land under the guidance of Kakashi-senpai. The respect he had for the former Special Forces captain was clear in the way he spoke about him. I guess Pervy Sage wasn't lying about Kakashi-sensei being an ANBU captain. The genin thought to himself, slightly shocked that his master was telling him the truth for once. He was about to respond, but something made him stop. A dense fog was beginning to roll in off the ocean. That coupled with the orange glow from the sunset triggered brief flashes of events he did not remember to appear before his eyes. So brief that he didn't really understand what was happening. The blonde attempted to reach for those memories again, but they were gone as swiftly as they had arrived. He shut his eyelids, the sudden imagery giving him the beginning of a pounding headache. That's strange. What was that? He felt uneasy, but he was unsure why. Naruto. A surprised voice broke him from his trance. He began to take in his surroundings. He was staring at a rather large house with a small boy sitting on the steps that led up to the front door. The entire time he had been deep in thought, his feet were subconsciously taking him back to the first place he stayed that was outside the protective walls of the Leaf Village. Inari. A big smile appeared on the genin's face. How's it going, kid? Naruto. The black-haired boy, still wearing his white and blue hat, rushed over to his friend and gave him a hug. What are you doing here? He asked excitedly. Naruto patted Inari on the head and chuckled slightly at his enthusiasm. It reminded him of Konohamaru. It's a long story, but I should introduce these guys first. You're probably wondering who they are. He turned around to introduce his team of bodyguards. Only no one was to be seen. What are you talking about, Naruto? He asked with a confused expression on his face. There's no one there. The Leaf Village's #1 hyperactive knucklehead clenched his fists in annoyance. Stupid ANBU. They could have told me they were gonna do that. Now I look stupid. He was slightly bitter, but he wasn't gonna let that ruin this great day. Naruto simply reached back and scratched his head, letting out an embarrassed laugh. Never mind, don't mind me. Are you gonna be here long? Do you need a place to stay? Naruto didn't know it, but Inari idolized him. After all, after the passing of his adoptive father Kaiza, he was the one who got him to believe in the existence of heroes again. That would be great. Are you sure it's okay? Are you kidding? Mom and Grandpa always say you're welcome here whenever you want. He was beaming. Let's go inside, it's getting late and I'm sure they want to see you, too. Before he even knew it, Naruto was being dragged inside. Just atop the house, 8 figures landed silently. The ANBU team was under the strict orders of the Hokage herself to not be seen by anyone. They couldn't risk their presence raising any questions or causing any sort of panic. After exchanging glances, they nodded to one another in understanding. They all dispersed in different directions. They would guard the boy by setting up a perimeter until the Sannin returned. After being invited into the house by Inari, he was met with the surprised, but pleased, reactions of Tazuna and Tsunami. Almost instantly, as if a member of the family himself, Naruto was invited to take a seat at the table. Dinner was almost ready and Tazuna was sure there would be much to talk about today. Now Tazuna, Inari, and Naruto were sitting around the dinner table, while Tsunami was finishing preparing the food. All 4 of them were smiling happily. You know, kid. The old man began, sipping on what appeared to be a glass of some sort of alcohol that genin couldn't identify. We were all just thinking about when you were gonna pay us that visit that you promised. Although, I was kind of expecting the other members of your team to be here as well. How are Kakashi, Sakura, and Sasuke doing? Good, I hope. He finished, bringing the glass to his lips, the ice clinking against the sides of the cup. Sasuke was still a sore spot that he didn't really want to talk about. Though, that wasn't Tazuna's fault. How could he possibly know that? Naruto's face darkened a bit, but no one noticed. Inari was too young to understand. Tsunami had been facing away from them while preparing the food, though she was intently listening, and Tazuna was already getting a bit tipsy. His cheeks were a tad flush. This gave the Uzumaki enough time to recover so he could put on his brave face. They're all doing great. He gave his best attempt to be enthusiastic. I'm sure they would have all loved to come with me, but I'm actually away from the village right now training with my, he trailed off, unsure of what title to give to Jiraiya. Mentor. He finished lamely. Where is this man right now? Tsunami asked, motherly instinct kicking in. If he's supposed to be your guardian while you're out of the village, shouldn't he be with you? That's where it gets a little complicated. Naruto began to explain. See, he got assigned a super important mission that he said was too dangerous for me to go on. And since we weren't too far away from the land of waves, I asked if it would be okay if I stayed with you guys until he got back. He just dropped you off without saying a word. Tsunami's voice betrayed a touch of sadness. I'm sorry, Naruto, but when he comes to get you, I'm gonna have to teach this man some manners. While she was saying that, she was smacking a rolling pin against the palm of her hand. Naruto laughed awkwardly. It's not like that. He reassured. He left before we even got here. I got escorted by members of the Leafs ANBU. They aren't very good with conversation, so they're probably watching the house from a distance to make sure I'm safe. ANBU, huh? Tazuna grumbled. You know about them? Naruto asked. Yeah. Funny enough, when requesting my mission from the Leaf Village, I wanted to be escorted by ANBU. I heard they were strong, but I was told I didn't have enough money. So I got stuck with you. He let out a bellowing laugh, nearly spilling his freshly refilled glass of alcohol. Naruto's sweat dropped at the old man's actions. Those guys are high profile. How did a squirt like you manage to get watched by a whole team of them? There was a touch of concern in his voice. He cared for the boy, so if he was in trouble, he would help to make sure he was okay. Naruto laughed nervously. Oh, well, you know, it's just precaution. I'm a genin outside of my ninja village. He leaned in and flashed a confident smile. Besides, the Hokage loves me. He didn't want to make them worry, and telling them that an extremely dangerous criminal organization was after him would do just that. Tazuna returned the smile. Oh, didn't know our dinner guest had all of these connections. He teased lightly. Wow. Inari exclaimed. So cool. I bet you're really important in your village. Naruto grinned sheepishly. Well, when you put it like that. I'm pretty great, aren't I? He boasted shamelessly. Alright, everyone. Tsunami caught everyone's attention as she began placing food on the table. While I'm sure we all want to hear about all of the stories Naruto has, he's probably very hungry. You guys remember how much he ate last time he was here? She finished with a small chuckle. Naruto's eyes practically bulged out of his head. Last time he ate Tsunami's cooking, though it was delicious. It mainly consisted of rice and a few pieces of meat and vegetables. This time around, she prepared lobster, salmon, and some delicious-looking meat that looked to be pork. While there was still rice, Naruto was looking at a small feast. A far cry from what felt like a few short months ago. Whoa! Was the only verbal reaction he could muster. This stuff looks expensive. Is it really okay if I eat some of this? Slightly worried that he was being a burden, Tazuna patted the boy on the shoulder and gave him a genuine smile. Kid, without you, we would have never been able to eat like this. Of course, you can have all you want. Naruto blinked. He looked over at Tsunami, who was now sitting down with the rest of them, and Inari. They both were also smiling genuinely at him. What do you mean? He asked dumbly. What do I have to do with anything? Because of that bridge, things have changed a lot in this land. Now that people can easily come and go, trading has been prosperous. We have more money than ever before, and because of that my services are highly requested. People can afford to remodel their homes, new tenants want houses built from the ground up. The land has life once again, and it's all thanks to you. The blonde scratched the back of his head awkwardly. Thanks, but I didn't really do all that much. Honest. You did a lot. Inari said seriously. The glint in his eyes struck a chord in the genin. They meant every word they were saying to him. Naruto felt similar emotions to when he left the land of waves the first time welling up inside him. Like he almost wanted to cry. Though he hadn't spent a lot of time in Wave, he truly felt like a welcomed part of the family when he was there. Not growing up with that, it was really nice to have. Even only if it was for a little. Eat. Tsunami gently urged. Naruto nodded, a smile plastered across his face. Thanks for the food. He yelled appreciatively as he began to dig in. After the first bite, his eyes lit up. This is delicious. Jiraiya was pacing back and forth for what had felt like hours. That was probably because he has actually been pacing for hours. He stopped and looked up into the sky. It was the following morning from when he had said goodbye to Naruto, and the sun had just risen about an hour ago. The air was fresh and crisp, cool dew covered the grass at his feet. If he was not currently in a state of mild panic, he might actually be able to enjoy his surroundings. He was currently standing outside the gates to the hot water village. After separating from the blonde and pack of ANBU, he set off for the land of hot water at a fairly modest pace. It took him about 12 hours to arrive at the rendezvous point. Not too shabby in his opinion. The part that concerned the white-haired sage was that his contact was nowhere to be found. Naki is a man that the Sannin has known for a number of years. As his source of intel for the land of hot water, they had previously met many times and the man has never been late once. If anything, he usually arrived early even before the man he reported to. Jiraiya saw him as dependable and professional. Not exactly the kind of person he'd want to hang out with or buy drinks at the bar with, but the perfect kind of person to have a professional relationship with. In short, Naki was someone who wouldn't be late without an important reason. A pit was beginning to form at the bottom of the Sannin's stomach. He had a bad feeling that something was going to happen, he just had no idea what. Though unaware of his fate, Jiraiya had good reason to worry about his contact. It was a gruesome scene to behold. The front door had been viciously broken down. He lay collapsed on the floor in the living area of his own home. He had several cuts and bruises adorning his face. The room was trashed, obvious signs of a struggle. Blood was splattered all along the walls. His body was cold, lifeless. And worst of all, it appears his heart had been ripped straight out of his chest. That's it for part 2 of this story. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.